As a species, we love to categorize and label. I believe that's where the myths about namers come from. Namers were individuals who would dedicate their lives to finding the true names of the elements, in the belief that if they found them, they would have control over them. What is a name if not a label? And we label ourselves from a very early age, as if we intrinsically know that finding our true name will give us the power to control our future. What we don't realise, though, is adopting a false name will have the opposite effect. I was introduced to how poor a namer I had been with the imminent birth of my first child, not through the many comical suggestions I made for his name, but by some information which came to light about myself. To help you understand, I'm going to have to tell you a bit of my story, so please bear with me. My early name would have been informed by my family. We adopt what we are repeatedly told, so it would look something like happy, caring, loving, intelligent, possibly stubborn. With the start of primary school came new influences. My peers would kindly point out my many differences, and even I would start to realise my inexplicable oddness. I will give you some examples. In assembly, when everyone would clap, unbeknown to me, I would raise my hand, only to try and lower it again before anyone noticed. I would flash from extreme calmness to furious in the blink of an eye, the basis for my brother's many favourite games. I could give you other examples, but I'd like to keep some of my dignity. I couldn't explain any of these. So obviously the suggestions I was receiving that I was strange, weird, or a freak seemed to make much more logic. And these were backed up by my performance in class. I struggled with reading, writing, and spelling. When we'd have the weekly spelling tests, after each word was read, there'd be an extra one, just for the stupid boy. My clumsiness and lack of coordination meant that sports, music, and art were difficult. And the less said about my handwriting, the better. There is a reason why my school stopped awarding pen licenses. Now, you would be forgiven for thinking I was a miserable child, but it's not true. I'm British. We accept our lot with wartime spirit. As an England football supporter, I am conditioned for disappointment. With secondary school, my life had turned into lots of contradictions. I was not as stupid as first thought. I had been placed in all the top sets, and I was predicted very impressive grades. The problem was, they never materialised. My teachers would report that I was the model student who sometimes lacked focus and effort. Now, I knew I was trying, so either I was a fraud or destined to fall short like my national team. I had strengths in maths and business, so I planned an exciting career in accounting. I would volunteer and engage in everything, all to prove my worth. Desperate to impress, I became a jack of all trades and master of none. Now, you may be wondering where the adults are in this story, and I want to make it clear that more loving and supporting parents do not exist. And I had some very extraordinary teachers. The problem was, I was extraordinary at masking, even from myself. I had a script and a persona for every social group, and no one saw them all. The cracks did form. After a particularly underwhelming set of GCSE results, one of my teachers let slip that I'd done pretty well for a dyslexic. So it turned out in primary school they had contacted home, but advised against labelling a child. The irony. It was confirmed at university that I was in fact dyslexic. The decisive piece of information was the difference between my IQ, which is about 140, and my reading age, which was that of a 7-year-old. The report and subsequent support focused on my inadequacies. So for me, it was confirmed. I was truly a freak, a broken genius. Now, I could continue on, but I'm hoping you're getting the idea. I will say that my false name continued to have sway over my life. It was the primary cause for my tragically low self-esteem and my constant anxiety. I just thought everyone had their problems, so why make a fuss? It hadn't ever occurred to me that my brain would be fundamentally different to those around me, especially as many of my traits were shared by my family. And I have known many impressive successes. So what changed? Out of the blue, my doctor told me I had ADHD. I only asked him to check my thyroid. Like many people who receive a late diagnosis, suddenly many things started to click into place. The treatment focused on understanding. And with that, there was a cascade. Many elements of my false name suddenly were proven to be poor synonyms or just completely wrong. The difference between an adjective and a noun suddenly became relevant. I can engage in laziness, but I am not lazy. Any of the names based on adjectives should have been an invitation to investigate, not something to hide shamefully. In fact, all the elements of my false name which made me feel inadequate were wrong or poorly understood. When I returned to look at dyslexia, I found, as well as the many challenges, there are strengths. I had built a life around hiding aspects of myself which I thought made me look rude, unprofessional, or strange. I found I started to understand these, and therefore I could build my life around my strengths. As well as ADHD and dyslexia, I discovered autism, dysgraphia, and prosperagnesia hiding underneath. With each of these revelations and a lot of reading, I made peace with these terms and can now incorporate them into my identity. I tell all of my students about these aspects of my name, trying to normalize neurodiversity, pointing out that there's no shame in struggling. I try to manage expectations with an explanation. I try to manage expectations with an explanation, but I do not ask to be excused of any of my obligations. I have found that language is the key. As I discovered new communities, I gained access to an ever-expanding lexicon. As I delved deeper, I learned aspects of neurology and psychology that would help me learn my true name better and understand it. I'm not going to say it's always been a pleasant experience. Many of my discoveries have been double-edged. But I am a much better person for having done this, and I would never go back. My hope by sharing aspects of my story with you today is that others will not have to live under a false name. And in the very least, I hope you will consider, how well do you know your true name?